a very fun topic to talk about today. So we're calling it the whys behind the nose, which just means why we are saying no to certain foods when you have a chronic inflammatory disease, whether that be autoimmune disease, an autoimmune form of arthritis, anything of that nature. So basically foods that cause a leaky gut or dysbiosis, we're going to go through all the whys and how it interacts and interferes with certain body functions. So if you are new to our community, though, we are going to introduce ourselves so you know who you're talking to. My name is Casey Kephart. I'm the founder of the Feel Good Formula. I'm a functional medicine nutritionist, and I work with women with all different types of autoimmune diseases to get you back to the activities you love, get your life back, trash those symptoms, all the good things. And I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, where the sun always shines, and it's a beautiful week this week.
I'm jealous.
It's hard sitting inside, honestly.
I can imagine. And I'm Jessica Melnick. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, the founder of the Anti-Arthritis Method, the host of the Happy Joint Arthritis Solutions Group. And I help both men and women with various forms of arthritis get back to living life the way they choose to, not the way that they have to. And I am in Saskatchewan, Canada, Saskatoon in particular. And the sun is not shining today. It is very lightly snowing, and it is very cold this week. So warming up by a good 10, 15 degrees by Friday. Fingers crossed. It is minus 21 Celsius right now.
Oh my gosh.
Very cool.
Yes. Okay, let's just get right into it because I have a feeling we're going to go a little over time on this one. So everybody who's listening right now probably has some inflammatory disease, some form of autoimmune disease. So it's believed that if you have an autoimmune disease, or in order for an autoimmune disease to develop, you have to have some sort of leaky gut or dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is uneven ratios of bad bacteria and good bacteria. So we like it at 80% good, 20% bad. Dysbiosis is the scale flipped. And there's a lot of bad creatures when you have this ratio. Lots of different yeast, lots of different bad bacteria. This can be candida, things like SIBO, or just that ugly rash you have on your skin, or that those nasty bowels that you have, that joint pain. This is dysbiosis and or leaky gut. So if you have autoimmune disease, all we're saying is that you probably have a leaky gut and or dysbiosis at the same time. So we're going over today the foods that you need to stop eating for a while so we can heal that leaky gut, so we can get that 80-20 ratio back in the proper alignment. And we're going over the foods that will contribute to more of a leaky gut. So these foods include grains, which is gluten as well. Pseudo grains. Is it pseudo or pseudo? I can never say the word.
Pseudo.
Thank you. I say like every word wrong. Pseudo grains, which are starchy seeds and of broad-leafed plants. So it's things like amaranth, buckwheat, chia, quinoa. All of these superfoods that the media likes to tell us about and how great they are for our body, people like us, we are dying from these foods internally, and it is making us feel worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's probably one of the hardest things to explain to a patient of getting off of, honestly. Legumes would be another area, another food that we're going to go over, and also dairy. So these are the four main food groups we usually tell people to stay off of while we're healing our guts. These foods are very nutrient poor, just meaning they don't provide a lot to us. Despite what we've been told about milk bringing a lot of calcium and the superfoods of chia and buckwheat, they cause a lot of malabsorption in us, just meaning that we cannot absorb these foods and our body is attacking them. So again, it's doing worse than it is better. grains and legumes are high in omega-6, and in America and in Canada, we have this thing called the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet. And it's sad because it's very nutrient poor. And with the SAD diet, we have a large consumption of omega-6 fatty acids in comparison to omega-3 fatty acids. And again, with like the bad bacteria and the good bacteria, we want to flip that scale. We want a healthy balance of omega-3 fatty acids to omega-6 fatty acids. I think we did a live on this, but just omega-6 fatty acids are very oxidized and carcinogenic with us. They're good in certain amounts, but they become bad very fast. And these would be things like your baked goods and your fried foods, your potato or corn chips that you eat. Omega-3s. Yes. Omega-3s would be your fish oils, and your, why am I causing a blank on omega-3s? Fish oil, what else?
There'd be, well, if you can tolerate it, walnuts.
Thank you.
Some flax seeds as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then all of these foods as well, with the grains, the pseudograins, the legumes, and the dairy, they cause overgrowth of yeast and bacteria in our small intestine. So again, we're just feeding that bad bacteria every single day and possibly with every single meal. So think about that. Think about just how you feel next time you eat this stuff. Think about how you feel when you decide you're going to eliminate it. And we can tell you testimonials of our clients who have gotten rid of this and how much better they feel. But there's more. So if you have an autoimmune disease, there's certain foods that make your autoimmune disease worse, and there's certain foods that trigger us more. So these foods would be nuts, seeds, and nightshades. So we always ask to eliminate that if you do have an autoimmune disease or are susceptible to one. So it provides a very intense immune response in you. Having an autoimmune disease already does that, but eating these foods triggers that immune response. And it can initiate this like chronic inflammation, chronic immune response in you. So we always start with the elimination diet to get all of these inflammatory, immune stimulating, leaky gut disruptors out of your diet. And then we start to reintroduce them back in. So not all of these things are gone forever, but as you'll start to find out in this live, even if you don't have an autoimmune disease or a chronic inflammatory disease, they are disrupting you. You just have a higher tolerance than us right now. Mm-hmm. So before we pass it on to Jessica and we get into the nitty gritty, why are we saying these class of foods though? The pseudograins, the grains, the dairy, the legumes? It's because they contain substances in them that are actually harmful for our gut. So these substances in them are lectins. This word is becoming more popular, so I hope you've heard of this word before. They're digestive enzyme inhibitors. There's saponins in them, and there's phytic acid in them. And again, we're going to go over all of this. It's going to be very sciencey, but we're going to try to break it down pretty well for you. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. And we'll be sure to answer them or type back after the live. So just a little bit on lectins. These are very difficult to digest, and they strongly interact with that brush border of our intestines, that leaky gut. And consumption of these lectins over time can produce diseases, and it can activate the immune system and cause that leaky gut. So these effects can be very subtle. There can be no symptoms at the time, but later down the road, these can cause disease. Genetics, of course, play a role in it, but they are harmful to everybody in some way. So I like using this example as cancer just didn't develop overnight, right? This has been a chronic thing leading up from genetics, your lifestyle, and environment. It's the same things with all of these foods that we're going over. So Jessica, I'm going to hand it off to you and drink some water after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a lot of information. And the reason we're sharing this with you is because we do get these questions from our clients a lot of the time, and just from prospective clients as well. Like, well, why do I have to eliminate these foods? Because we have been taught for so many years that these foods are all really healthy for us. And yes, for some people, they can be, some of them. But when you are susceptible to an autoimmune disease, or you have an active autoimmune disease or arthritis, which is an inflammatory condition, you can't handle these foods. And so we're going to go into some of the more details about why, so that you can really have a good understanding and make these choices for yourself based on the science. So the first topic we're going to talk about is prolamins. So prolamins are a form of toxic lectin. So that's one of those bad substances in foods that we eat that are typically found in grains, legumes, and pseudograins. So we're going to be talking about our prolamins, they're also known as glutenoids. So gluten is one of the most famous. It is one of the most studied and one of the most dangerous prolamins. And again, it is a toxic lectin. So there are similar proteins in also non-glutinous grains, pseudograins, and legumes that cause similar problems as gluten. So that's why we avoid them all. And prolamins, like gluten, are actually proteins. So they're a protein that is found in that grain itself, or sometimes a pseudograin or a legume. They are not completely broken down by our digestive processes, and they are actually protease inhibitors. So a protease inhibitor is not allowing our body to properly break down protein when we ingest it. And so what that means is that we're going to have undigested food that is going to be shunted down our digestive tract where it shouldn't be, and causing problems further down our digestive tract. So what also happens is that when these proteins aren't fully developed, they're crossing our gut lining in larger molecules than they should be, and they feed the bad bacteria and yeast. So this is what causes dysbiosis, is that we are just adding fuel to the fire of the bad bacteria and yeast, and we may already have an imbalance and not even know that. And when this happens, our immune system, that is in our gut, we have about 80% of our immune system right there, our immune system is triggered, and this increases inflammation. So when this happens, we increase the permeability of our gut lining, which is also known as leaky gut. These proteins leak out, and then our immune system creates antibodies to fight these undigested food proteins. And so what antibodies formation is that our immune system is tagging these molecules, and it remembers it and is like, you're bad, I need to attack you. So this is what causes food sensitivities and our symptoms when we eat certain foods that we are sensitive to. So this process also damages the gut lining by damaging the gut lining cells themselves, and creates more openings in the gut lining. So it can create openings, and it can damage the cells, and it can also create openings in between those cells, because they are supposed to be tightly fitted together. And this process actually pulls them apart. We do not want that. So another prolamin is casein, which is a protein found in dairy. And this causes damage to our gut lining, just like gluten would. So we're going to talk about cross-reactivity. Casey's going to go over that. We're going to explain what also kind of happens when our body mistakes a certain protein that's leaking from our gut as something else, and why we're having, maybe if we're sensitive to gluten, we might also be sensitive to corn, for example. Mm-hmm. So let's go into that, Casey. Let's talk about some cross-reactivity.
Yeah, and I know we did a live on this before too. So if you're looking for more in-depth, go search our YouTube, and there is definitely a live on cross-reactivity. Yes. But Jessica just mentioned the antibodies, and this is going to be really important for cross-reactivity. So there are certain protein molecules that resemble the gluten protein molecule. And we have antibodies against that gluten protein molecule already. But our bodies are, they make mistakes when they're chronically inflamed and tired. And they sometimes can't decipher between that gluten protein molecule and, let's say, an oat protein molecule. They look very the same. So you're gluten insensitive or you're gluten intolerant, you're gluten free because you have celiac, you stay away from gluten, but you're still eating oats. Your body is still in that reactive mode because you're still eating oats, and it's thinking that you're still going to be eating gluten. That response may not be as bad. I'm gluten free because of celiacs, and when I eat oats, I don't get a gluten attack, but I can tell that my body is not happy that I ate oats. So that is because your body is attacking that oat molecule like it is a foreign invader. So this is called gluten cross reactivity. So these foods include dairy, like Jessica just said, casein, which is in dairy, is destroys the gut lining just like gluten would. So we have dairy proteins, we have oats, yeasts, instant coffee, which is very interesting to a lot of people, sorghum, millet, corn, rice, and potatoes. So if you are eating any of those types of foods that I just listed, your body may be reacting to them in a lighter formation as it would to gluten because it thinks it's kind of the same thing and it's attacking it. So this is going to cause an increase in inflammation, an increase in your immune response, an increase in your gut permeability, just meaning increase in more of a leaky gut and dysbiosis. So even gluten-free grains and flours can still have gluten in them through contamination. So that cross-reactivity and that maybe have some gluten molecules in there, you'll want to be careful of if you are eating gluten-free. So that was the lowdown on that cross-reactivity. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, please. We know that this is very sciencey and very maybe hard to understand right now. So Jessica's going to go over another form of a toxic lectin. If you can see a trend here, we don't like lectins or gluten.
So another toxic lectin is called agglutinin. I love how it has very similar, it has the word gluten in it. It's like there's a theme here. So agglutinins are found in grains and legumes. And what they do is that they can create the clumping of red blood cells. It's also known as agglutination. This is not a good thing. So these agglutinins are part of the seed's natural protection against pests, fungus, etc. So genetically modified crops are actually created to have more of these lectins in them to keep them protected from pests. But when we eat these GMO crops, it gives us more gut damage because they have more of this lectin content. So wheat germ is actually one of the most studied agglutinins, and it's actually added to genetically modified corn, if you can believe that. That's why corn can cause so many issues for so many people, because it is so good at resisting pests. So the wheat germ agglutinin itself is added to the GMO corn to make the corn more resilient against pests. So it has the same genetics as wheat, go figure. So corn, not necessarily gluten-free. These agglutinins are very difficult to digest, and neither cooking or our stomach acid can actually break it down. So that's pretty crazy if our stomach acid can't even break it down. So what happens is that these agglutinin molecules travel through our small intestine intact, which creates leaky gut down the road, and it stimulates our immune system. And it also binds to our human intestinal cells. It increases inflammation and creation of inflammatory cytokines, which are produced by our immune system in response to inflammation, which increases the death of our white blood cells. And white blood cells are really important for our immune function. So we don't want to kill off our white blood cells. When we have low white blood cell count, that's when we actually get sick. So another popular agglutinin is found in kidney beans, and it does the same thing as wheat germ agglutinin, and is shown to have an increase in E. coli overgrowth in our small intestine when consumed. So for whatever reason, that agglutinin in kidney beans loves to feed the bad bacteria in our small intestine and our gut, and E. coli in particular. So this is E. coli itself is really commonly found in SIBO, which is another short form for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we do not want this. So SIBO is something where you have extreme digestive distress right after eating. You get extremely bloated, distended. You just feel terrible. You probably have a lot of IBS type symptoms as well. That is likely because of an E. coli overgrowth. And we aren't supposed to have a bunch of bad bacteria in our small intestines or in our stomach. But what happens is when we have this, we're eating a lot of these foods and we have an overgrowth of the bad bacteria in our gut, it can actually travel up our intestinal tract from our colon to our small intestine and then into our stomach in really serious cases. So you don't want that happening in your body. And there are tests for SIBO. If you suspect that you have it, it's really important to have it treated. It's very serious. And on last couple words on agglutinins, they are also found in peanuts and soy. And they are so effective at stimulating the immune system that they've actually been researched for use in vaccines because they stimulate the immune system so well. And they've been researched to see if they're actually going to make the vaccines more effective because of how much they actually stimulate the immune system. So pretty crazy. And tomatoes are also a food to look out for because they contain agglutinins and lectins that are also immune stimulants that create leaky gut. So those are some things to be aware of with agglutinins.
So eye-opening. I remember the first time I was learning all of this back in the day, and it was like, oh my gosh, kidney beans and tomatoes are bad for me and they're hurting my autoimmune disease. I remember just eating rice and kidney beans every single day for lunch because I thought that was a complete protein and really good for me and fat-free. Like, how the tables have turned with how I eat now.
Oh, I used to live off of chickpeas and lentils and bell peppers and tomatoes. And I wonder why I felt so crappy. And I was like, how? I eat so healthy. Like, why do I always have a stomach ache?
I know. I'm eating what they're telling me to. It's fat free and it's a complete protein. It's a superfood.
Yeah, no, I was very resistant. So I can really relate to my clients who are having trouble wrapping their head around this, and also to our prospective clients in our communities who are just like, what? I've been told for years that these are some of the best things I can eat. And I completely understand because I felt the same way. And I was really resistant at first when I learned what I was supposed to give up in terms of my diet and switch over to. I was like, I'm totally confused. I fought it for a long time. So,
but it's a journey.
It is. It takes a while to wrap your head around it. And this helps because having the science and understanding why, I know for me, it really helped me be less resistant to making these changes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to answer a question really quick before we get into the other part of the live. So one person asked, can you eat oatmeal with lupus? Lupus is an autoimmune disease. We would highly advise against eating oats just for that reason that we explained earlier of the cross-reactivity. Everything we're saying today does go hand in hand with lupus because it is an autoimmune disease. So let us know if you have any more questions, but try to stay away from the oats.
Yeah. And I also want to say that includes gluten-free oats because
100%.
Of course, people are like, oh, but it's like, what if I get the gluten-free oats or the gluten-free oat flour? So that just means it's not contaminated by glutinous grains, but you're still getting all those toxic lectins
and cross-reactivity.
Yeah, and you're still getting all the components that are wreaking havoc on your gut, creating an immune response, damaging your gut, all those things, unfortunately. So Grains are something that if you are dealing with an autoimmune condition, you just don't want to have.
Yep. All right. So the next bucket here is digestive enzyme inhibitors, and these are in high concentrations of grains, pseudograins, and legumes. These can survive cooking and are resistant to digestion, just meaning that we don't break these down very well in our bodies. And that's going to activate our immune system, and it's going to increase in the leaky gut area, just because, like Jessica said earlier, these large molecules that aren't being able to be broken down are passing through our gut lining, which should not happen. And now our body is in fight mode because it's like, what the heck is happening? I need to break this down. That's what stimulates the chronic inflammation and the immune response. So they are considered anti-nutrients because they interfere with absorption of nutrients in our food, just meaning that we're not absorbing this correctly, and we're not. So grains should have a lot of nutrients in it that should be good for our body. But because of this digestive enzyme inhibitor, we're not absorbing this and we're not utilizing it how we should in our bodies. When food is not digested properly, the pancreas has to secrete more of its enzymes to help with the digestion, which stresses the pancreas out. And then the pancreas needs amino acids to do all of this job that it has to do. So then there is less nutrition for the body. So let me say that in a different way. So the pancreas needs amino acids to secrete the enzymes. So it takes the amino acids from our body. And if this is a constant cycle that we're doing because we can't break down these molecules that we're eating from the grains and the legumes, now we're stressing the pancreas out. Now we're increasing our inflammation even more, increasing the immune system, but also now we are protein deficient. We need protein for repair and recovery, brain function. I mean, like everything we need protein for. So it's just this vicious cycle that keeps going round and round and round with every single meal that we eat. So no wonder you're feeling awful and can't figure out why and almost gave up, right? Like, we hear you. Mm-hmm. So some other things is, obviously I just said we can increase the leaky gut. Undigested foods happening from these digestive enzyme inhibitors are feeding this bad bacteria even more. So that's where that dysbiosis comes in. Again, the immune response, like we're just repeating ourselves now. Yeah. And this also happens with dairy, nuts, and seeds. So these can play a big role in all of the inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases. And again, all of these things that I just stated are digestive enzyme inhibitors inhibiting or stopping us from breaking down our food and absorbing it properly, in a nutshell.
So we're down to the last two. So the first is phytates and phytic acid. So these components of foods interfere with mineral absorption as well, just like the digestive enzyme inhibitors. And so what happens is the phytic acid binds to minerals in our digestive tract, like calcium, iron, potassium, zinc, so things that we all need. And then these minerals can't be absorbed by the gut. So that means malnutrition. And it's really, really common to have mineral deficiencies and vitamin deficiencies when you have an active autoimmune condition. So when this happens, when the phytic acid is binding to minerals, that creates phytates. So again, we're kind of repeating the same processes. This irritates our gut lining, which leads to a leaky gut, or it's also known as intestinal permeability. Grains and legumes are high in phytates, and it's also found in nuts and seeds to a lesser extent. So as you get healthier, you might find that you are able to tolerate some nuts and seeds and incorporate that into your diet to a lesser extent. Phytates also limit the activity of our digestive enzymes. So again, our poor pancreas has to work so hard to digest the food that is not being digested further up the digestive tract because of these phytates. And excessive dietary phytate is a problem. Moderate amounts may provide antioxidant protection. So again, you might be able to tolerate moderate amounts. We would recommend like reintroducing some nuts and seeds once you're feeling a lot better. But you know, keeping it at a moderate level, not excessive or like constant all the time in your diet.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, last one. Saponins and I can never say this word, glycoalkaloids.
You got it.
Yes. Okay, so these stimulate the antibodies, which we talked about a little earlier. All plants contain saponins, especially in their seeds, and this is, again, to fight off pests, just like the lectins do. These are in legumes, pseudograins, and nightshade veggies, which are your tomatoes, your potatoes, your eggplant, your peppers, things like that. So these are detergent-like molecules. So they rearrange cholesterol molecules in our body. That does not sound okay. And they create anything messing with molecules and DNA in our bodies is not okay. Yeah. It creates holes in our gut lining cells, allowing a variety of substances to enter those gut cells. So like we mentioned before, the bacteria, the toxins, the undigested food particles, all of these things are entering our leaky gut. Saponins can be good. They're said to prevent cancer and have other beneficial effects. However, if we have an autoimmune disease, if we're eating these things in a high consumption, they are not doing us good. They are doing us more harm. So some harmful effects are weight loss from malabsorption. So if we are not absorbing our food, how can we maintain or gain weight if we need to? And birth defects and pregnancy has a lot of side effects to it too if you are eating a high consumption of saponins. So glycoalkaloids can have toxicity in high levels of consumption, definitely leading to autoimmune disease, hence why we are talking about this. Low concentrations of glycoalkaloids can kill human intestinal cells and cause a leaky gut. So we went, it's not good in high or low concentrations, basically. So just let's stop eating the legumes, please. Saponins are able to enter the bloodstream. We are able to do that through a leaky gut because once we enter that leaky gut, it goes straight to the bloodstream. It can cause a destruction of cell membranes of red blood cells. We do not just want to destroy any membranes of any cell in our body because that is what protects our cell. Saponins are being researched for vaccines as well. Isn't that funny, though, that we're testing these things because there's such a good immune response, but they have such a horrible response in our body? Mm-hmm. I'll leave it there. Where were we? And then glycoalkaloids inhibit some molecules that work in nerve function. So if you are complaining to your doctor about nerve function, nerve disorder, whatever, it might work in your favor to eliminate some of these food groups, the grains, the pseudograins, the dairy.
And nightshades.
And yeah, thank you, nightshades. Decrease in transporting nutrients like carbohydrates and sugars. It creates more food to feed the bad bacteria in the gut. So I know we've mentioned this before, but sugars and carbohydrates do feed that bad bacteria in the gut. So we like to have more of a moderate or low consumption of carbohydrates and sugars, because a lot of times with autoimmune diseases, again, that bad bacteria is up here, and that is SIBO and Candida, and we need to get those carbohydrates down to stop feeding that bad bacteria. And last thing before we leave, saponins can increase E. coli strains. So we talked about this with SIBO as well. So it can be another form of leading to SIBO. And saponins can increase 6 different strains of E. coli. So you really have it going against you if you are susceptible for this.
That's intense.
Yes. So I hope all of this semi made sense to you. Replay it, comment below if you have any more questions.
Another question, Casey, quickly. Someone asked, can we eat meat? Absolutely. We recommend good quality, the best quality that you can afford, preferably things like grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pasture-raised, organic, if you can. Meat is good, very good. Very high bioavailability of nutrients.
Definitely. Yes, we did not mention meat or veggies here, so please eat them. Not nightshade veggies, though. Okay, I need to run. This was fun. So
lots of info.
I know, I enjoyed this one. All right, Jessica will be back on Thursday, and I hope everybody has a good rest of their week.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks, guys. Take care.